it seems to me that the state of Israel, as it exists today, an ethno-state, is something of a blueprint for racial supremacists in Europe. People that want eternally white France, Britain, Germany, etc., etc. They take inspiration from the idea of Israel. When did that become a norm? And I don't just mean anti-Semites agreeing with Zionists, because we can talk about that later. That has a real heritage. But people literally pointing to it as the template for a post-liberal state. That seems quite recent as well.
It is recent, and you have to remember the very idea of the Zionist project was to solve a European problem of anti-Semitism by imposing a European Jewish state on the Arab world, at the heart of the Arab world, against the will of the Palestinians. So from the very beginning, there was an alliance that believed in this project, that was fully aware that the only way of implementing this project was by force. And that alliance, to begin with, included also the left, included also the liberals, to begin with. A very important, in different stages in the way that this project of Zionism became a Jewish state in 1948, and then a state that was recognized as part of the Western world. The alliance, until I would say the beginning of this century, probably the most important members of that alliance was not the right, not the extreme right for sure, not populist fascist leaders. Actually, in the 60s and the 70s, it was the social democratic parties, it was the Democratic Party in the United States, sort of center and center left were very important members of the alliance that gave Israel moral validity, political validity, and material assistance. Now, once the Israeli behavior became even more aggressive, and the whole Israeli political system shifted to the right in 2000, then even more friendly members of that alliance that provided immunity for Israel began to be a bit more critical. And that's when it was very clear that if you look at the state of Israel as standing on two pillars, a moral pillar and a material pillar, the moral pillar was almost totally eroded already by the beginning of the 20th century. That is when the alliance shifted from having also democratic and socialist or social democratic members in it into relying heavily on populist neo-right parties, fascist parties. Christian fundamentalists became even more important than they ever were before. So it was a matter of having the support of either very cynical, sinister multinational corporation or military industries or security industries on the one hand, or ideological movements or persons who believe that the creation of the Jewish state is God's will, the fulfillment of a certain kind of messianic vision, whether a Jewish one or a Christian one. And the other elements that were there and supported the Zionist project in the State of Israel became less and less assertive in this alliance and less confident that they were on the right side of history. So I think, yes, we have now something else. Maybe I just want to add that there's also something very historically structural here. Namely, however you look at it, the most anti-Semitic and neo-right fascist movements in Europe have something in common with Zionism. Both ideological movements, for different reasons, would like to see the Jews of Europe in Palestine. So that created an ideological alliance. Sometimes there were even more embarrassing chapters in the relationship between the leadership of the Zionist movement in the 1920s and 1930s with fascist forces in Europe and so on. But that was the exception, not the rule. But it came out of the same uniformity of interest, The idea is that Jews do not belong to Europe, not belong in Europe, they belong in a Jewish European state at the heart of the Arab world. So, in a way, this is the trajectory of history. Now we have the real alliance, the real allies of a project that to begin with was invalid morally, politically, and probably was not very practical unless you could ensure huge force behind it to create it and later on to sustain it.